Welcome to the shooting show. This week we follow Chris Dalton on a roebuck hunt in southwest Scotland, and he weighs up the pros and cons of deer dog choice. Plus we bring you all the latest news from the shooting world.
Okay, this is Zosia. So she's now probably 13, just over 13 weeks old. She's actually going to be ultimately Oscar's replacement. So what we thought we'd do was perhaps just film her progress through the training cycle to hopefully where she's a good working deer dog. We selected a good pup. She's well bred. She comes from a working family, grouse mower, down in Devon. She's been with us now about a week. So all we're doing initially is just socialising her to the situation of the family and really letting her have a puppyhood, letting her grow up. She's relaxed, she likes to play. She's already quite happy carrying things around. She wants to carry things all the time. It's usually my Wellingtons and shoes, so I've got to watch her with that. But apart from the very basics, I'm not going to do anything with her. Just really getting her settled into the family. She'll sit down automatically now when I feed her, and I'll encourage that. And basically, really, as I say, let her grow up and let her have a childhood. What I wanted to do was actually show the contrast and if you like, a trained deer dog. So as I took Paul out this morning to try for a roebuck up on the tops, set off nice and early. Fortunately, because it was cool, we didn't have too many midges this morning, so it was a pleasant morning to be out. Now Oscar, because he's a pointer breed, I actually let him have his head, if you like, to a degree, because he now knows what I require of him. So I don't have him rock steady to heel. He works in front of me 10-15 yards, because then you can see he's checking the wind. And particularly on a big open area like we were on this morning, the deer can be tucked in, laid in the heather or down in the gullies, and you just can't see them. There's such a lot of dead ground. So really, all we're doing is watching the dog. You could see where he indicated a buck to us. Unfortunately, the first buck we saw was really down below us in a gully, and we literally walked on top of it. There's no way you could see it. It was laid down just in a hollow. Not really long enough for Paul to get set on the rifle and take the shot, so that one lives to fight another day. Probably within minutes of seeing that buck, we saw movement on our left, and another bigger buck, I think probably that had seen the smaller buck run off, came in to challenge. So we actually again had a brief opportunity to shoot that buck. He was downwind of us, so he actually came in the wrong side. Again, not really the opportunity to take the shot, so we just got the latter part of that on film as he went into the woodland. Now she's actually a specialist pointer breed, so I'm hoping that there's a bit more of a pointing aspect to her work, but we'll see how it develops over the course of the coming months.
Chris's deer dog training is proceeding well, but we insist on getting a successful stalk on camera too. So Chris heads out on a solo mission that evening, accompanied by the experienced hound, Oscar. The Weimaraner sticks to the task expertly and soon goes on point to indicate a nearby deer, but it's a doe. We sit tight, optimistic that there'll be a buck not far behind. Our doe wanders off, but a cursory glass of the next field over reveals the buck we've been after. Chris stalks in as quickly as he can without alerting the beast. But by the time we get there, the buck has taken to browsing behind the fence at the field edge. With fence and sheep obstructing our view, we're not getting a shot anytime soon, and just have to hope the buck moves. The minutes tick on, and the buck is in no hurry, but eventually it moves on 80 yards to the right, where the fence gives way to a clearing with an unobstructed shot. Crawling the final few yards, Chris readies for a shot at the broadside buck. The gecko round is well placed and the deer drops on the spot. Following best practice, Chris waits a few minutes then approaches the carcass. Minutes later it's inspected and ready to take back to the larder, but Chris isn't done yet. We've not got much filming light left, but Chris reckons another shootable buck is nearby. A scan with the Ale range binos confirms his suspicions. This would be a good buck to take, but the lack of cover between us and him will make the approach difficult. So far the buck appears unconcerned, so we opt for route 1, a slow crawl directly across the field. Oscar proves his worth once again, sticking right by Chris's side when it would be easy to give the game away. And with the crawl complete, Chris gets the opportunity to end the stalk on a high. Chris relying on some canine assistance there. And now, it's the Shooting Show News.
This is the Shooting Show News. A ban on lead ammunition has been categorically ruled out in the UK. The Environment Secretary Liz Truss said the evidence presented by the Lead Ammunition Group did not show that the impacts of lead ammunition were significant enough to justify changing current policy. This ends a 5-year saga for the LAG, which saw half its members resign in disgust at the biased nature of its final report. Now, Bask says DEFRA's pro-lead response puts the antis back in their box. Protecting lead shot was Ms Truss's final act as Environment Secretary. In Theresa May's cabinet reshuffle, it's Truss out, Leadsom in. Andrea Leadsom affirmed her support for the shooting sports at last year's Tory party conference. And when asked by the Countryside Alliance last week, she said she had no plans to change the current regime when it comes to firearms licensing. All the major shooting organisations have welcomed her appointment. The EU firearms debate rumbles on, and still no one can agree on whether the changes to the Firearms Directive are a good thing or not. Most shooting organisations have praised the latest version of the bill. Bask said it would largely focus on closing loopholes around deactivated and imitation firearms, while protecting those who shoot for legitimate reasons. However, online commenters have criticised what looks like a ban on semi-automatic rifles, which could see 2.2 semi-autos at risk in the UK. Semi-automatic shotguns are not thought to be affected. It's M&S versus Packham in the latest media battle over shooting. BBC presenter Chris Packham has piled pressure on Sparks not to stock grouse this game season. But the supermarket is standing strong against celebrity bullying, saying it will continue to sell grouse sourced to the highest standards of game and moorland management. Bask said Packham was abusing his position as a media personality to put forward an ill-informed anti-shooting agenda. Don't miss the August issue of iShoot magazine for a grouse shooting special. It'll be out next week. And finally, British Shooting's double trap squad scored a huge medal haul at the European Championships. The men's team were crowned European champions after an incredible collective performance. Rachel Parrish became the women's champ and Matt Coward-Holly and Tim Neal both reached the final of the men's event, with Matt eventually beating Tim in a shoot-off for bronze. All in all, the athletes brought 5 medals home from the event in Lonato. That was the Shooting Show News.
Today I'm starting with the shooting. Reason for that is that this is actually my own rifle and I'm doing some ballistic testing, so it ties in nicely with doing a review. We're looking at the Mauser M03. It's really unfortunate that the weather has turned today. When I first arrived it was spot on, and my first bit of shooting to zero in the new Z6 scope, I didn't have the camera turned on downrange, so unfortunately I don't have the proper evidence of this group to show you, but this was the 170 grain geckos. This was my board sight shot, and this was 3 shots straight after, without the moderator on actually. Then the weather started to pick up a wee bit in the wind, and I was shooting the 180 grain RWS round, which I hadn't put through the rifle before, so I was keen to see how it shot. And again, very, very respectable, less than half an inch group there. But I really wanted to get the barrel change grouping test done before the wind picked up too much, which it has now. What I did there was I fired a couple of shots with the current 0. In fact, I did it with the 180 grain RWS because I knew that it shot very well. And then I proceeded to take another shot after the scope was removed, and then another shot after the scope and then barrel had been removed and put back on. And the end result of that despite it not being as tight as it could have been because of the weather, is still very impressive. This is the group just here, and as you can see, that group of 1, 2, 3, 4, it was 6 shots I took, is still just under the inch mark. So I think that should be enough evidence. That's 2 removals of the scope and an exchange of the barrel, and it shot exactly where I left it. I've done this so many times before, and I have absolute confidence in being able to store the scope not on the rifle, which I do every time the rifle goes in the cupboard, stick it back on and go to the range with it, no problem. The Mauser M03 has been around for quite some time now. I would go as far to say that it's almost become a modern day classic. It's just been so successful. I can't see any reason why Mauser would change the design. The fact that it's an interchangeable barrel system gives it great versatility, and it has become the benchmark against which all other exchangeable barrel systems are based. As you've seen, it shoots very well. You won't have any complaints with this rifle in terms of its shootability. It is fairly heavy. That is one of the downsides of the M03. Don't expect a light mountain rifle, but it has to be able to cater for such a variety of cartridges, you know, right from 223 up to 375, which I do have a barrel for. I use it on the hinds every year, but the bonus of this is that I can stick my 375 barrel on it and take it to Africa for dangerous game. At the heart of the M03 is its ability to switch barrels. Now that is in 2 parts. One is the mounting system, and secondly is the barrel exchange. The mounting system is very good. The mounts that Mauser make and manufacture and supply for the M03 are incredibly well machined, and you won't have any complaints. They are top quality. The one downside is that you have no choice. You have to fit a Mauser mount to your M03. To take the scope mounts off, it's a very simple affair. You simply grab these tabs here, flick it to one side, and the scope comes off. It's simple and works well. You can't ask for any more than that, and I've certainly never had any issues with it. Now the second part to being able to switch the barrels on this is obviously changing the barrel itself. Now that is a very simple affair. You do need the tool that Mauser supply. However, my torque driver that I've got here also has the same fitting to it, so it's not particularly unusual. These 2 screws underneath the rifle here that are recessed, you simply put the key in with the bolt back, undo them until they're completely backed out, and that is it. The barrel lifts out, and you now have the 308 barrel in this case in your hand. If you want to change the barrel to a different caliber, you can see the slight cradle there, which is shaped for the bottom of the barrel, just where the chamber is. And if you have a look on here, you can just see the marks on the metalwork itself where it secures in place. And obviously the consistency of the rifle to do this is what enables it to return exactly to 0, and also what gives it its inherent accuracy. With this open, you simply slide these in to place, and you'll see the locating pin here go through the hole in the bottom of the chamber. With that in place, prior to securing the barrel back in, it is advisable to push the bolt and lock it down into the barrel. The way that it is possible to achieve repeatable head spacing when you're shooting with a number of different barrels is by locking the lugs of the bolt into the barrel itself, and that way it's absolutely guaranteed. You're not relying on it being locked into the receiver as would be in many rifles built in the traditional way. Now you will notice here that despite the fact that I've got a 223 barrel in and I've just taken a 308 barrel out, I am still able to lock the bolt down. The lugs themselves are exactly the same despite the fact that you can change the bolt head itself. So that is the next thing that we have to do. If I just slide the bolt out by drawing it back and pushing down this rather neat bolt release catch, I then have the bolt in my hand. Now, changing the bolt head is very simple. Press the cocking lever all the way across to the left, over in the safe position, and then just pull the bolt head towards you and it comes out. Put that to one side. This is the 223 bolt head, and you simply slide that into place, holding the lever across while you do it. Simple as that. Let go, slide it back in. You have to depress the bolt release to get the bolt back in, and then just slide it into the barrel like I said before. And then once you've done that, you can turn the rifle over and do up these two screws. Remarkably, the Mauser system centers the barrel in the stock pretty much perfectly every time. So you don't have to worry about centering it while you're tightening it up. Because of the way that the cradle is designed, it snugs it down into position and it can only go into one position. So I have a new magazine here. Obviously, the only way that you can achieve fitting the 223 into such a big magazine, which has to be able to cope with the big Magnum cartridges as well, is to simply block off the back and reduce the opening at the surface that the bullets ride out on. But it fits in exactly the same way and clicks into place. I've talked a little bit about the bolt. Obviously, it's very long. I've already said that it has to cope with a large variety of cartridges, and for that reason it has to be as long as is needed to cope with the largest. For that reason, if you're shooting the small calibers like a 223, you do feel like you're a little bit overgunned, and obviously the bolt travel is quite long. If you get used to it, you don't actually have to bring the bolt all the way back, because it's going to pick up the rounds from the front and it will eject as soon as the case is clear. So if you can get into the habit, your bolt throw is still short. You don't have to bring it all the way back. The cocking of this rifle is via a cocking lever. Now, a lot of rifles these days are moving towards cocking levers. You've seen them on the shooting show before. On the Mauser, it's actually cammed, which is very smart. So instead of requiring the full force to cock the firing pin in position to fire, the rear mechanism, which allows you to cock and decock, is cammed and essentially geared so that it doesn't require the full force, as we've had with some of the push levers on the back of some rifles I've reviewed. To put the rifle back on safe, it does require a little bit of a knack. The first time I ever did this on an M03, I ended up catching my thumb. You have to depress this lever at the same time as holding this across so that you can gently carry it back to the safe position. And after a while, it's very easy to do. And on safe, you simply push it all the way to the left. You can see that little extra movement there, and that unlocks the bolt, allows you to lift it, and then you could extract a cartridge. The magazines are well made. They're largely made of some form of alloy. It does have plastic components to it, but they're well constructed and in the right places. To extract the magazine, you depress this button here. Now what that does inside, if you have a look in here, is it releases this little lever and it just makes it flush with the well of the magazine. And if you look on this side of the mag, you can see where that fits in. So it's a very simple system which shouldn't really go wrong. It shouldn't ever drop a magazine out on you because of the way that this springs out. It wants to sit and catch underneath this latch here. So it's very, very simple, and the tension for putting the magazine in and making sure that this little clip is under tension the whole time and in place is via this very simple and quite strong looking sprung lever inside, which just rests on the top of the magazine. You can actually see a little hole here. Now, if you use the Allen key that is supplied with the rifle, you can turn this and lock the button in place. So in actual fact, although it's not very convenient, you can make this essentially a fixed mag that you would load from the top. Finally, we get to the trigger. Now, the trigger unit on this rifle came as standard from the UK distributors with a set trigger. Now, the standard trigger is very crisp. It's a tad heavy, and one of the downsides of having this chassis system that you can't get into is that you can't adjust the trigger. It does have a set option, and in the same way as all set options, you simply push, if it's cocked, it would help if I'd done that to start with, you push the trigger forward and that's it in its set position. Now this is adjustable. You, again, using the Allen key supplied with the rifle, you slot it into this hole in the top of the trigger blade, and you can rotate that round and adjust the brake weight on the set trigger. Now you can't adjust it drastically, but you certainly can tweak it and you certainly can notice the difference. The rifle as a whole fits great. In terms of shape of stock, it's a little bit chunkier than you might expect for some of the smaller calibers, but I've already said that with regard to the action. But everything else is just spot on.
Well, that's it for this week. Thanks for watching. Please like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. And if you're not a member of BASC, it's time to join now. BASC, looking after your sport, looking after you. This has been The Shooting Show.